mode.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for M1 Basic Training. We're going to go over an introduction to our M1 security and automation controls today. So this is a good course for beginners or someone that's just wanting to brush up on the M1. My name is Amy Strickland and I'm with our tech support department. Throughout the webinar today, if you have questions, please type those questions into the GoToWebinar control panel that you should see on the right side of your screen. We will get to just as many of those questions as we can throughout the webinar. We'll verbalize those questions and answer them for you. If you have a question that we can't get to either because we run out of time or maybe it's a more complicated question that we need to follow up with you, we will provide that follow-up via email. We will be providing a follow-up email to you on Monday that's going to contain a copy of this presentation as well as a link to a recording of the session and some other resources that we feel will be helpful to you. We'll also include a summary of our question and answer session so that you have that as well. Joining me today is Brad Weeks. He's the Tech Support Manager here at ELK Products, so obviously very knowledgeable about the M1, and he's going to be co-presenting with me today on this webinar, so we're happy to have Brad with us. So now that I've kind of given you an idea of how you can ask us questions, we have a question for you. So I'm going to launch a poll on the screen. If you would just please answer the question, and we're just trying to get an idea of our audience today who is with us here. Have you installed an M1 before? Maybe you're completely new to M1. We just want to kind of get an idea of our audience. I'm going to leave that up for just a few more seconds. And I am going to go ahead and close that poll now, and thanks everyone for answering. It does look like the majority of our audience today is new to M1 and has never installed one. We do have some portion of the audience that has installed one or two, so we're really glad that you joined us today. Hopefully this will be very educational and beneficial webinar for you. So without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and jump into what is M1. M1 is a cross-platform control, and what we mean by that is it is a control that can control many different subsystems in the home or business. So you've got your security system, you can do lighting control, access control, we have energy management through lighting and also thermostats and other devices, electrical devices that you can control. So from one system you have control of a lot of different subsystems. Kind of think of it as like a universal remote for your home or business that's going to control everything from one system, from one interface. And this is kind of going to give you an idea of what you can control. As I mentioned, you can do security, lights and fans, thermostats, small appliances. We have a water shutoff valve that can be incorporated with leak detection sensors that are available from some of our partners and other manufacturers that we can work with. Doors and gates, garage doors, shades and blinds. So just a lot of different things here that you can control with the M1. So let's talk a little bit about the features of the M1. We're going to focus in on the M1 Gold. It is a 16 onboard zones, but expandable to 208. 144 of those zones could be wireless, and we have a lot of different wireless options that we can use. We have our own wireless line, which is a two-way wireless line, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But we also work with GE, ITI, the Interlogix format sensors, as well as the Honeywell 5800 series sensors, and we have different receivers to support those. So that's your inputs. On the outputs, there are 13 on board, so you've got your alarm outputs. Output 1 is your voice, output 2 is Siren, and then you have a 1-form C relay and some voltage outputs, and we'll dig into those a little bit more as well. We can support up to 199 users, and a user could be, an arm-disarm code, an access credential like a key fob or a card, or even, biometric readers can be used with the M1. So, a lot of different things that fall under users, but you can have up to 199 of those. The system supports up to 8 areas or partitions or account numbers, just depending on your terminology. So this is, just separate separations that you can make within the system so that you can independently arm and disarm different areas, and also have independent account numbers for reporting. So that's up to 8 of those. The event history log holds 512 entries. That's accessible from your programming software as well as other applications like M1 To Go and some of the smartphone apps. We have 6 different arming levels, and so you can see those there. We've got away and vacation, and those are basically the same. Vacation just allows us to do some automation things. So if you're going to be gone for a longer period of time, we can automate things differently. You've got stay instant, night, and night instant. The instant modes being removing the entry delay time so that you don't have that even on zones that are programmed to have it. And you may be thinking that's a lot of ARM modes, and not all of your customers will want to use all of those, and it may be something that you want to limit for them, and you can certainly do that in programming, and we'll show you that in just a bit. The M1 Gold provides voice alerts. These can be on-site alerts for different system status, alarms, that sort of thing. You can program that to give you reminders and that sort of thing. And this can also be through the voice dialer alerts that you get from a phone call. So that's a good way to inform your customer of different events that are not necessarily alarm related, but things that they may want to know about. And then the M1 also has a built-in astronomical clock so that it knows when sunrise and sunset occur, and we can incorporate that into the programming for lighting control and other things. We offer a variety of keypads, so you can see those here on the screen. The original keypad is the one in the top center, and then we have different keypad models. So you can really pick a keypad that's going to meet the taste and decor of your client, and be something that's useful to them, and not something that they're going to not like looking at every day. So you've got different styles that you can choose from. The Navigator keypad here is a small touchscreen. It's a 3.5-inch touchscreen, so that's a very convenient, intuitive keypad to use with the full color display and touch capability. And then another different keypad that we have is the small arming station, which is great for areas where you just need minimal information and you just want to be able to arm and disarm the system and maybe activate a few functions. So basic keypad where you don't really want to have a full-fledged keypad, maybe in a garage or some other area like that, and it fits in a Decora style plate, so very nice looking on the wall as well. Now, of course, keypads are the thing that's in the house that or the business that you're going to be interacting with, but what it's all about these days is the smart devices, your smartphone, your tablet, your laptop computers or computers that you might be using in other areas. And so we have a variety of remote control options for these types of devices. M1 To Go is a software application that's offered by ELK for free, so you can download that from our website. And then there are apps available for other devices from third-party software developers that have developed based on ELK's protocol. So you can see you have eKeypad for the iOS platform and M1 Touch Pro for Android. And then Connect One is our cloud-based service partner, and they provide a number of different services at a monthly fee that you can get. And so there's a lot of benefits to that if you have a large system or multiple systems and user management's going to be an issue, or you want very detailed email notifications, or just cross-platform as far as your interface to the system. So they have a lot to offer, but again, that is a monthly fee-based service, whereas eKeypad and M1 Touch Pro are apps that you purchase one time, and you don't have to pay a monthly fee for those. Now, as I mentioned before, ELK offers a two-way wireless product line that is compatible with the M1 control, and we continue to build on this product line. We just recently released the ELKS 6040 glass break sensor, so that's a new product that we actually just released a couple weeks ago, and of course we've added a smoke detector and a panic button in the last few months as well, and we continue to add to that line, so you'll continue to see that grow. But we're pleased to be offering a more complete wireless solution, and it is two-way wireless, so you get that signal acknowledgement for reliability and also to maximize your battery life. The M1 works with a lot of different products from different manufacturers, and that's what allows us to kind of be that universal remote. We're integration friendly. We play well with others. So here's just a list of some of the partner manufacturers that we work with, and we do keep an updated list on our website if you want to look at that information, see who we're working with, and we have that categorized for you as well. But you can just see some of the different manufacturers that we work with here for lighting control, thermostat control. There are a number of different software, touchscreen integration type interfaces like your Crestron, Control 4, Savant, those types of things. Then we also have wireless partners. In addition to our own wireless line, as I mentioned, we do work with the ITI or Honeywell format wireless. So a lot of different things there. There's some cellular partners there as well. So again, for more details, complete listing, go to elkproducts.com. All right, now we're going to spend a little bit of time going over the board layout. And Brad, would you like to get us started on that?
Sure, absolutely. Greatly appreciate everyone's time today joining us for our webinar. And right now we're going to start with the M1 board layout, some wiring and installation tips. And hopefully by the end of the day you don't look like the guy here at the bottom of the slide. Hopefully your installs go better than his. So to start with, we have the M1 cross-platform control in its black plastic housing. It does incorporate removable terminal strips, so if you ever need to replace a board or move a board, you don't have to disconnect all the wires connected to it. In the upper left-hand corner of the board, these are your zone inputs. You have 16 onboard zones. Below this, on the left-hand side, is your AC transformer input, as well as your DC voltage outputs. System does incorporate a master on-off switch, which does disconnect the AC power and the battery. We have our battery leads here at the bottom, and the system can charge up to an 18 amp hour battery. At the very bottom of the black plastic housing, there's a white barcode sticker that contains the serial number of the system. Each M1 Gold system has its own unique 8-digit serial number starting with 0. If it happens to be an M1 EZ8, it would start with the number 4. But you'll locate the serial number on the bottom of the black plastic housing, and this will be important when we get into the RP programming software. In the upper right-hand corner is where we have our hardwired connections to our telephone, our landline. Below this is serial port 0, the onboard serial port, and that's used to connect with ELK-RP or to our Ethernet module, or it can connect to third-party equipment. We'll talk a little more about this later. Below the RS-232 port, we have our low voltage outputs, 7 through 16. And below that we have outputs 1, 2, and 3, which output 1 is for interior speakers. Output 2 can incorporate speaker or it's a voltage output. And then output 3 is a Form C relay. We'll go over these a little more later as well. And below this is the RS-485 data bus, which we'll be using to connect our keypads and so forth. Well, it's time for a pop quiz. Now that we've gone over a little bit of the board information, does anyone remember how many on-board zone inputs the M1 has? We'll give you about 15 seconds to answer that.
You can just type your answers into the question box. Right, we're glad to see a lot of people here paying attention. Looks like we've got a lot of the correct answers there. Brad,
All right,
whenever you're ready, reveal the answer.
All right, the answer is 16. 16 on-board zone inputs. Remember, it's 16 on board, expandable up to 208. Now, speaking of the zone inputs, each zone on the system can be configured with a end-of-line resistor, a 2.2K ohm resistor, or you can configure the zone as normally open or normally closed. This is by zone. It's not by the entire system, so you can customize each zone to either incorporate the resistor or just simply be normally open or normally closed, depending on the sensor that you have. Each zone does share a negative with the zone beside it. And below this in the block diagram, we have an example of normally closed switch with the end-of-line resistor at the furthest end for proper supervision. You notice zone 16 can be configured for 2-wire smoke detectors. This is the only zone that will accept a 2-wire smoke detector. There's a special jumper right under zone 16 to switch it from a normal zone to a 2-wire smoke. The compatible 2-wire smoke detectors are listed on page 6 of the M1 installation manual. You can have up to 20 detectors daisy-chained together, and then the 820 ohm resistor would be at the furthest smoke detector. Any zone on the M1 system can be configured to accept a 4-wire smoke detector, but only zone 16 will accept 2-wire smoke detectors. Now, our power connections, we have 2 different power connection points on the board. We have the plus aux terminals, which would be used for your 4-wire smoke detectors or for any device that requires power to be removed from the device in order to reset it. And then we have the VAUX terminals, which are used to power your motion detectors or glass breaks and so forth. We actually give you 3 points on the board to connect your motion detectors and glass breaks. They're still the same VAUX power point, but we just give you 3 connection points to help divide up the wires or to help shed that load between the wires so that we're not trying to cram all of the wires under 2 screw terminals. The AC terminals on the board will accept our ELKS 16.5 45 VA transformers called the LTRG 1640. This is included in the kits. We have our master power switch, which, like I said earlier, does do the AC and the battery all at the same time. No need to disconnect your battery. And we have our battery connections, which allows you to connect anywhere from a 7 to an 18 amp hour sealed lead-acid battery. One nice feature on the M1 system, well, a couple of nice features actually. If you'll notice, right beside the master on-off switch, we've given you a nice warning indication in case you do connect your battery backwards. We get an LED indication that the battery's been reversed. There's also the capability with the M1 Gold to start it without AC power. There's 2 little solder pads in the lower left-hand corner of the circuit board. If you connect your battery and move the master on-off switch into the on position, you can short across those 2 terminals and jump start the system in case there's no 120 volt AC present. If it's new construction or so forth, and you want to test the system beforehand, you can do so while the system's running on battery only. Now in the upper right-hand corner of the board is where we would connect our incoming telephone line from the telephone company. And this uses just standard an RJ31X jack. Remember, the M1 should be the very first thing that the incoming phone line connects to for proper line seizure. And we feel very strongly about using surge suppressor, so we give you an ELK 952 surge suppressor in the kit. The 952 is very simple to incorporate into the system. If you're using the RJ31X jack, you would simply unplug the 8-pin modular cable from the jack, plug the 952 into it, and then the cable back from the M1 into the 952. Now for the 952 to work properly, it should be earth grounded or using a recommended grounding method, a metallic cold water pipe, or worst case, the electrical AC ground of the site. Now besides being able to communicate over landline, it is possible to incorporate cellular communication into the M1 system. And we do that by using the Uplink 4500EZ, which is used in conjunction with the ELK M1 XSP serial port expander. We do offer a special firmware update for the XSP to allow it to communicate full contact ID reporting through the Uplink module. There are a number of dial capture devices on the market today from companies like Uplink, Telguard, and others that simulate phone line voltage and current to the panel. And when the panel goes into alarm, seizes the phone line, dials the number, transmits the data, these dial capture modules will capture that information and turn around and rebroadcast it back to their proprietary networks. There's also IP alarm reporting using our M1 XEP, and at this time we are compatible with DSC SureGuard 3 and the Osborne Hoffman 2000E Internet receivers. As long as your central station has either one of those receivers, you can transmit signals over the Internet to your central monitoring service. Now the main serial port on the M1, that's in the upper right-hand corner. It's a 9-pin serial port. This is used with the ELK RP software for programming purposes, or to interface to third-party devices like touchscreens or home automation controllers. You can connect directly from this port to a serial port or to a USB port on your computer, or you can connect the ELK M1 XEP module, the Ethernet module, to this port, which then allows you access over the network, local area network, or through the Internet. So this means that once you have the system configured, you can make programming changes remotely using the RP software. The XEP module also allows the third-party apps like the iPhone and the Android app to communicate to the system through the Internet. And below is a pinout of the RS-232 port if for some reason you need to extend the cable from the M1 to the XEP module. Included with the XEP is the gray flat ribbon cable you see in the picture to the right. But if for some reason you need to move the XEP further away from the M1, it's a very simple 3-pin connection. It's straight through, pins 2 to 2, 3 to 3, and 5 to 5. But try to keep that distance under 50 feet. Let's talk a little bit about the outputs on the main board. We have output 1, which is our interior voice and siren output. This is for speakers only. And your overall load can be from 4 to 16 ohms connected to output 1. Typically this is where you're going to hear your voice announcements and your siren sounds and your general non-alarm voice messages through output 1. Output 2 is a supervised output. This is for exterior devices such as a speaker. The M1 has a built-in siren driver, so you can connect speakers to output 2 as long as you keep the overall load between 4 and 16 ohms. or you can convert output 2 to a voltage output where you can drive a self-contained Siren or some other 12-volt device. Output 2, when it is configured as a voltage output, is rated at 12-volt DC at 1 amp. So if you're using a self-contained Siren, make sure that the device, the self-contained Siren, doesn't draw more than 1 amp. If you're not using output 2, you need to install the 2.2 k ohm resistor across output 2 positive and negative to prevent the output 2 trouble condition. Make sure it's a resistor and not a direct short across output 2. You always want to make sure you put a resistor across it. Output 3 is a general purpose Form C relay, and it's used in program using the ELK-RP rule engine that, for instance, if when the system goes into alarm, you can turn output 3 on, or you can use output 3 to control a garage door, or basically anything that you can think of that a general purpose Form C relay could handle. It's 12 volt at 4 amps is the maximum that you can run through output 3 on the board. Outputs 7 through 16, these are our low voltage outputs off the J16 connector, and we do give you the wiring harness with the flying leads. Each one of these outputs is rated at 12 volt DC at 50 milliamps, and they are switched positive outputs. Once again, these are programmed using the ELK-RP rule engine, and you can convert outputs 9 through 16 by using our M1 relay board, which once again we give you Form C relays.
So Brad, there was a question about the total current available for all devices from the system. Can you give us some details on that?
Absolutely. The ELK M1 control has the capability, has a continuous output of 1 amp, meaning that everything connected to the board, the data bus, J16, output 2, the VOX, and the switch docks terminals, if we added all these devices together, everything that draws power from the control, you should not exceed 1 amp. When the system goes into alarm, it does have the capability of giving you 2.5 amps of power with the additional 1.5 amps coming from the battery.
Thank you, Brad.
You're welcome. Yep. Time for a pop quiz.
Okay,
Anybody remember? Go ahead, Amy.
I was going to say the answer to this was given to you, quite a few slides back. So let's see who remembers how many keypads the M1 can support. We're going to give you just a few more seconds on that, and then we will reveal the answer.
I'm certain everyone got it right.
So the M1 can support up to 16 keypads, so you can cover a pretty large area and have keypads everywhere that the customer might want them. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the keypads, we consider a keypad a Type 1 device, and there are a few other devices that are in the Type 1 category, including access modules, which is the M1KAM. That's a single door access module for access control. And then we also have remote supervised power supplies, the P212S, which is able to provide AC failure and low battery information to the M1 over the data bus. So between your keypads, access modules, and supervised power supplies, you can have up to 16.
All right, thank you very much. All right, moving right along, we have the M1 data bus connections, and this is in the lower right-hand corner, and this is the point where we're going to connect our keypads, our input expanders, our wireless receivers, our output expanders, and our serial port expanders, as well as supervised power supplies and the access control modules. The M1 can accept no more than 2 home runs to the data bus. Now, it is possible to daisy chain devices, in which case the device at the end of the run would have the terminating jumper installed. If you require more than 2 home runs, we offer data bus hubs which can be installed. The wire run for the M1 data bus should not exceed more than 4,000 feet. So if you're going from point A to your furthest point, as long as you don't exceed 4,000 feet while you're daisy chaining, should not be a problem. Now, the data can go 4,000 feet. Power, we would probably need a power supply somewhere remotely if we're going that type of distance. But below, in the block diagram, is an example of 2 home runs with devices daisy chained along the data bus. And you can see coming off the top run, we have a keypad and an input expander. And then on the second home run, looks like a relay board and a keypad. So the last 2 devices on each home run would accept a terminating jumper. Now, if you need more than 2 home runs coming off the control, we offer the M1 DBH. This is for new installations. It uses Cat5e or Cat6 wiring. There's no termination necessary at the device. We incorporate a RJ45 plug with the terminating resistor inside of it. Now, when using the DBH hub, you must calculate each home run doubled because we have the return path. This hub actually creates the daisy chain for you. It keeps the data A in a daisy chain, keeps data B in a daisy chain. But the hub really makes for a nice, neat, clean installation where you can home run back from remote sites back to the hub, terminate it with an RJ45 connector, and in the event you would ever need to remove a device or something, it just makes for easy installation, removal, troubleshooting, and so forth. Really convenient way to terminate home runs connected to the M1 control. Now, to the right of this is the M1 DBHR. This is for retrofit installations in which you're using existing 4-conductor wiring. Once again, no more than 2 home runs per branch, so each branch would have a terminating jumper installed. Now, the DBHR should be installed as close to the main control as possible. Even within the same enclosure is fine, but the distance between the M1 to the retrofit hub should be as short as possible. Now, wiring for the M1 DBH, here's an example wiring to a keypad. This would apply also to input expanders, output expanders, and the serial port expander if they're connected remotely. So from the DBH hub, we terminate with the RJ45 connector. We run our Cat5e or Cat6 cable out to the, in this case, the keypad, and we're going to make these connections at the keypad. You'll notice for the data A connection, which is our green wire on our keypad, we have a total of 3 wires under this connection point. We have our data A, and then we have our return data A1 back to the retrofit, back to the DBH hub. And then we have data B, once again, 3 connection points, and B1 is our return path back to our hub. This keeps the data A and data B in a continuous daisy chain. You could substitute an input expander, an output expander out here as well, and it'd be the same connection points. The RJ45 is wired 568A, standard color code. Now in our example here, in our little pop quiz here, can everyone tell me where you should terminate based upon the information provided earlier? We'll give you about 15 seconds or so to let you take a look at this single home run with 2 devices daisy chained together. And we'll let you decide where the termination should be. We really need to get the Jeopardy music.
I know it. We need to get one of our little recordables so that we can press the button and play it. Another
Awesome.
great ELK product. If you're not familiar with it, check out the ELK 120 or ELK 124 recordable modules. They're really neat for stuff like that. We need to get creative there, don't we, Brad?
We do. We do. We'll work on that. All right, is everyone ready? The answer is you should terminate points A and C because this is a single home run. The main control, JP3, will be terminated with the jumper, and then the last keypad, number C, would be terminated as well. All right, we're going to make things a little more complicated. Now we have two parallel home runs coming off of the control where we've daisy-chained devices together. The top one, once again, we have the two keypads. And then the second home run, we've daisy-chained either input expanders or output expanders together. So give ourselves about another 15 seconds here to look over the diagram, and you decide where the termination should be placed. Okay,
I would start
ready?
doing the sound, but y'all don't want to hear that.
I thought about it myself. All right, the answer is C and F. The two home runs, devices daisy-chained together. The two furthest devices, the last two devices on the home runs, would accept the terminating jumpers. Now we're going to make it just a little harder this time. Now we've incorporated the data bus hub. So we have just a single home run going to the hub, and then we've home run Cat5e or Cat6 wiring to our data bus hub. So in this scenario, where would you install the termination? Okay, everyone ready? The answer would be A and G. The control would be terminated, and then the first unused port on the hub, you would install the RJ45 with the terminating resistor inside of it. Okay, I'm going to have to do it one more time. We're going to complicate it again.
Big time.
This one incorporates the retrofit hub. Now, once again, the distance from the control to the retrofit hub should be as short as possible, caching inside the enclosure. And we've maxed out well, not maxed it out, but we've managed to use all four branches of the retrofit hub. In branch 1, we have a single home run with two devices daisy-chained. In branch 2, we have two parallel home runs with a single device on each. Branch 3, we have a single home run to one device. We have another home run to daisy-chained devices. And then on branch 4, we have just a single device. So take just about 15 seconds, look over the diagram, and see if you can decide where the terminating jumper should be installed.
And this is definitely a more complicated example than some of the other ones, but just kind of keep in mind that each branch off of the hub is almost kind of like a little mini data bus, and so the same rules apply to the branch that would apply to the main control.
That is a very good point. And now we're going to reveal the answer. We'll go over this. Because we have just a single home run going from the control to the retrofit hub, the JP3 jumper on the main control would be installed. The input jumper on the retrofit hub, JP1, should be installed as well. On branch 1, once again, this is just a single home run with multiple devices daisy chained. We terminate the last device with a jumper. We also terminate the branch, JP2 in this case, because it terminates branch 1. It would be terminated as well. If we look at branch 2, we have 2 parallel home runs going out to devices. In this case, each device will have a terminating jumper installed, but the branch itself does not. So JP3 is not terminated. This is for branch 2. JP3 is not terminated. If we look at branch 3, we have 2 home runs going out to the devices. The last device on each home run will accept the terminating jumper. The branch is not terminated. And finally, branch 4 has just a single device, and in this case, the device and the branch are terminated. And what this does, termination engages a 120 ohm resistor on the branch and on the device itself for terminating the RS-485 data bus. And in the installation manual is a little bit more information on proper bus termination. If you have any questions, you can always give us a call or send us an email. We'll be glad to help you out if you're having problems terminating the data bus.
So to review on the data bus, the control can accept no more than 2 runs, and it is always looking for 2 termination points, no more, no less. And again, the same thing applies to each branch on this particular hub, because it is an active hub and each branch is kind of like a little mini data bus. But if you just kind of remember those guidelines, you should be in good shape, and like Brad said, you can always call us if you need help.
Any questions on data bus termination?
If you have any questions, just go ahead and type those in. We can get to those later. Oh, here's a great question. Would you ever install 2 of the M1DBHRs? And you could certainly do that. You could not have more than 2, but you could have 2. The M1DBHR, as Brad mentioned before, has to be located as close to the control as possible, and it has to be connected directly to the control panel. It can't come off of another hub. So you could have 2 of those coming off the main control. That's your 2 acceptable available runs that you could have there, giving you a total of 16 runs that you could have, 8 per hub. So you could certainly do that. And you could also have, if the installation required it, you could have one of the M1DBHRs and one of the M1DBHs on the same installation. That would also be acceptable.
All right, good question. Now, I will say it is not, you cannot hook a DBHR to a branch of another DBHR. That's something you cannot do. So the DBHR has to be connected to the main control, like Amy stated.
All right, so now we're going to dive into the ELKRP software, and while we get that pulled up, I did want to quickly address one other question that came in earlier. We were talking about our partner manufacturers, and so there was a question about Lutron Homeworks. We currently do not interface with Lutron Homeworks, but we do support the Lutron Radio Raw 2. So now we're going to dive into the ELKRP software, and so you should be seeing that software on your screen now. We're looking at our basic account detail screen. This is the screen that you're going to see anytime you open or create a new account in ELKRP. So I'm just going to show you real quick here how you can go through and create a new account. We do have one open here that we're going to be working in, but I'll just kind of show you the steps here for creating a new account. So if we go to the File menu, we can go to New Account. And so here you can see the information that it's going to ask for related to the new account. So you need to put in an account ID. You select the system type. Now there's really at this point basically two system types that you would be seeing, either the M1G, which is the M1 Gold we've been talking about here today. We also offer a smaller version of the M1 called the M1 Easy 8. It's an 8-zone panel and it doesn't have the voice capability that the M1 Gold has, so you can see that in the drop down menu. Now this other option here, M1 Standard, that actually goes back early on in the infancy of M1. We did have an M1 Standard panel that was discontinued quite a long time ago, but we continue to support that hardware with our software. So you would put in your account ID, your serial number, which Brad pointed out earlier in the presentation where you can find that. And then you have the option to either copy from an existing account, which is great if you have a template set up, that sort of thing. You can go ahead and do that, or you can create a default account, which is where you're going to start with most new installations, unless you've already set up that template. And your central station information is always going to be similar, or you always want the front door to be zone 1, that sort of thing. You can set up the template. Under the Create Default Account option, you do have two selections that you can make. These are related to the kind of wireless that the system would support, and again, that's regardless of whether or not there's actually wireless on the system. All of the M1 panels that are leaving the factory now are shipping with a version 5.x firmware. We do have a version 4.x firmware, which is a legacy version that supported a CADX, like an NX548E type receiver for GE. So if you have a receiver that was manufactured by ELK, whether it's for our own wireless or the ITI Interlogix format or the Honeywell format, you're going to select the version 5. That's going to be the selection you make the majority of the time. So you fill that information out and it creates a new account for you. And then we had this one. We'll go ahead and open that back up. Alright, so this is basically just a blank account that we've created here for the M1 Basic Training. So again, you've just got some record keeping information here, and then you can put notes in. This is a good place to store information that you might want to remember. Sometimes there's a big gap between going back to a job, so say there's a large dog, or the customer always wants you to take your shoes off before you go in, or even something like the local IP address of a system versus the remote IP address. This is a good place to keep those kind of notes. On the right side of the screen here, we have our serial number. That is something that you can change in an account. Like say you switch out the panel for a new panel, you can just come in, change the serial number, and then be able to load that same account into a different panel. We've got a place here for a telephone number. That's the number that the software or the computer would need to dial to reach that, were you to be using a modem. You have a place here for your IP and port information if you're connecting IP, and then the RP access code. Now I want to take just a moment here to touch on the RP access code, what it is, and just provide a caution to you on that. The RP access code is basically an anti-takeover code. It's to help you, secure the panel from being accessed by someone else with this software. So the value that you see there is the default value that is loaded into every panel before it leaves ELK. So that's what you're going to use with any of your new panels. But once you go in and change this, and that can only be done while you are connected, that's the only way that you can actually make a change to this code. But once you change it, you need to make sure that you document that very well, because once that code is changed, it cannot be viewed or cleared from the keypad. So if you lose that code, you lose your ability to connect to it with the software, and the only way to get back into the panel with the software is to actually send it to the factory, and we we have to wipe the memory out, and we do charge a fee for that service. So again, just caution with changing the RP access code. It's a great security feature, but just be sure that you document the new code somewhere so that you have that in case you were to lose it, like say your computer crashes or something like that. So now I'm going to dive into users, and so you can see here if I just click on users, I get kind of a spreadsheet type view of all of the users. Currently this account only has one user in it, so we can see our user 1. Now we can add things to the system through the software very easily, and this works with different categories, but I'll just show you. If you right click on the word users, then you can go to new user, and this will bring up a window that will allow you to set up a bunch of different users. You can set up 1 or you can set up 100, just whatever your needs are. So it asks you how many you want to create and then where you want to start. Now if for some reason you wanted to skip over a block of users and go to another user number other than the next one available here, which in this case is 2, you can certainly do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and create one user and then click OK here. I'm going to create user 2. The next thing that it's going to ask me is whether I want to use custom values for this user or if I want to copy from an existing user. So if you're setting up, say, a lot of access users, you may want to just copy from an existing access user, and that way you're just changing names and credentials and you've already got, areas and the authorization set up. So in certain cases that would work well, but in this case and in a lot of cases we're just going to use custom values so that we can just pick and choose what we want for this user. So now I've got user 2 here, and I'm just going to name it Brad. And then, Brad, do you have a particular user code you would like to use, or do you just want something random?
Let's do random.
So ELKRP has a nice feature to allow you to do a random code so that you're not constantly just trying to come up with codes, or maybe you get hung up on a number and then all your users end up with the same code. That's not good. You don't want that. So you can click this generate button here and it will actually generate a user code for you that doesn't exist in any of the other users in the system, and so you can generate that code, see if the customer's happy with it, and if they're not, then you can generate another one. So that's a cool little feature there for you. Below that we have our areas. Again, those are the partitions, and a user can actually be in more than one area. So if you wanted to have a user that could, say, disarm the main building or the main house and the pool house and the garage, then you could have that user be in all areas where you could restrict other users. And here we have our authorizations. Now, basic authorizations for a user are arm, disarm, and bypass, but you can, of course, customize that per user. The access option here is for access control, so when you're going to be using it for that, that's the authorization you would choose instead of arm, disarm, or in addition to it, just depending on what you want that to do. Temporary code allows you to arm the system with that code, and because it was armed with it, then that code can disarm. But if the system was armed with a code that's not a temporary code, then the temporary code will not disarm. So an example might be if you have someone that's coming in for service periodically, and they're going to be coming in on Wednesday, you arm the system with that code on Wednesday and it works for them to disarm it, but they come back and try to come in on Thursday when you've armed with your normal code, it won't work. So that's kind of what that's for. Master is to allow you into menus 6, 7, and 8 of the keypad, which allows you to do things like change user codes or access system settings. So only users that have master selected can get into those. You can also restrict access to menus 1 through 5 through globals, and if you have done that, then this user 1 through 5 determines who can get into those menus. And then duress is to allow you to provide silent notification that a code was used if someone is forced to disarm their system. Then it can silently, completely unknown to the person that's standing there in front of the keypad, that the code is being sent to the central station. So we're just going to leave Brad on areas 1, 2, and 3 and leave him with arm, disarm, and bypass authorizations. So now if we go back to users, you can see I see both of the users that I have in the system now. And the same thing applies to areas. When you're looking at areas, you get an overview of the area. I'm going to go ahead and right click and go to New Area, and I'm going to create 2 new areas so that I get my Area 2 and 3 that I've set Brad up to be able to use. And so you can see we now have new areas populated. We have areas 1, 2, and 3. So we're just going to go ahead and name this Area 2, and we'll name this one Area 3. Just because I'm not very creative at naming things today. But just to give you an idea of what you can do here, this is where you find your entry and exit delay times, and we do have entry exit 1 and entry exit 2 zone definitions that correspond with these different times that you see here. The stay key on the keypads can scroll through different ARM modes, so you can have, as you see here, stay instant, night, and night instant, which I described those to you a little bit earlier. If you have any questions about what the difference between those modes are, just let me know. Type a question in there. But say you have a user that is not going to use night mode at all and not going to use stay instant mode, you can just take those off so that they are not confused by that when they're pressing that stay button. Say they accidentally press it twice, it will just stay in the mode that they wanted. Or, you know, again, if you want to use stay and stay instant, you can customize this just by these checkboxes. We've got a few other things here that I'm going to point out that are commonly asked about. The exit and stay keys. If you want quick arming without a code, then you can either have single press or double press. But if you don't want those keys to work without a code entry, maybe you want to keep a log of everyone that is arming and disarming the system. Again, they're the key being including the arming part, because the disarming is going to happen anyway, but you can uncheck both of those and the exit and stay key will require code entry. Another option that we get asked about here is this auto stay mode. So if you have this selected and you arm the system in away mode, but you do not violate an entry exit zone, the system assumes that you didn't leave because you didn't go out an entry exit door, and it reverts to stay mode, and that's to try to help with false alarms. So again, you can choose to turn that on or leave it off, up to you. The next thing we have here is keypads, and again, this is the same thing as the areas and users. Right click to set up new keypads, choose how many you want, where you want to start, and it asks you if you want to copy or use custom values, and then creates those keypads for you. So I'm going to name this one Garage. And you can see here currently it's assigned to Area 1, but let's say I want that to be an Area 2 keypad. Area 2 happens to be the garage, then you can assign it to an area. Now a keypad can only be assigned to one area. You cannot have a keypad that's assigned to multiple areas or that is global and controlling all the areas. However, we do have a menu in the keypad that does allow you to temporarily change the area that a keypad is assigned to, so that an Area 2 keypad could then, temporarily operate Area 1 and would automatically, after inactivity, revert back to its area. So we do have that in place for you if you need to control other areas from a keypad. You've got some options here related to what will be shown on the keypad, sounds that the keypad can make or not make, some options with the LEDs, and you've got your backlight and volume settings here, so that helps you with the audible and the display settings of the keypad. And then the keypads have F keys. Some of them have 4 F keys, some of them have 6. It just depends on the keypad model. And once you connect with ELKS, it sees what is actually enrolled in the system and will update these screens and gray out things that do not apply to the keypad model that you're using. Like if you have a KP2 keypad, it only has 4 F keys, so it would gray out F5 and F6 for you. But you can see these are typically by default set up for panic buttons, fire, police, medical. You can leave that, or you can customize that to do other things. So just to show you here in the drop down, you've got some different options here that you can set up. Like if you wanted to have it activate an automation task, you can do that. You can also just write rules for the F keys, and we'll show you an example of that here in just a bit. But if you do that, you can just leave the F key assignment here as disabled, and the key will still follow what the rule tells it to do. Now that's the activates event. The second drop-down box is your illumination event, and that determines what causes the backlight of that key to light up. So you can set that to follow the state of the system, a particular kind of alarm, arm state. You can have that follow zone states or output states. So there's a lot of different things you can do there, and I'm just going to pick output 50 there for this one. Let's say I had that set up as controlling the garage door, and I wanted visual indication whether the door was open or not. I could, select that zone. Let me just do that because that makes more sense at the moment. So I'm just going to select a zone there, and it would follow that zone. You can invert the light to change the state, so if it's lighting up when you would prefer it be dim and being dim when you prefer it be lighting up, you can invert it. You can also cause it to blink if it's something you really want to draw attention to. The key can require a code and also can be single press. So if you don't have single press selected, it's either press and hold or double press. But if you want to make it, quick and easy function for the customer, you can make it single press. Of course, we would caution you on using that on these alarms, and that's why that's not selected by default. The name here is what's going to show up on the keypad when you press that key. So if I wanted this one to be garage door, I could, name it garage door, and then when I press F4, I'm going to see garage door on the keypad so that it's clear to me what the purpose of that key is.
Amy, at the top there's a note about the zone wired to the keypad. Do you want to maybe touch on that just a little bit in case people aren't aware of that feature?
Sure. Pretty much all of the keypad models that we offer, with the exception of the small arming station, have a zone input and also a voltage output, a 12 volt 50 milliamp output available from the keypad. So that can be great if you maybe don't have the capability to get wire to a particular zone, or maybe you just forgot to put it in. You can wire a zone to the keypad as opposed to going all the way back to the control. The address of the keypad determines what that zone number will be, and this is a helpful little hint to tell you your keypad 2 zone is going to be 194. Now also the output off of keypad 2 would be output 194, so that's just a helpful little reminder there for you as to what zone or output number is associated with that keypad address. And that will segue us right into zones, so we'll spend just a little bit of time talking about that. Again, under zones we have our hardwired main board, and when I click on that I'm going to get an overview of that, and you can see this is basically just default programming that we're seeing here. We can click on that and go into a zone, and this is where you're going to find all of your fields and drop-down boxes and check boxes to program that zone. So let's just say this is the front door, and it's an entry-exit zone. So we can name it, we can pick the area that it's assigned to. You've got different attributes here that you can select for it. As this one shows, chime is enabled, so if you have the chime turned on and it's in one of the voice modes, it's going to announce what you see here in voice description. Well, by default that's zone 1, and that really doesn't tell us much, so we want to customize that so that we know what that is. So you have a drop-down menu here that's just a whole list of different words that the M1 can say, but the most convenient way to do this is just to start typing the word that you want. And you see I typed in FR, and my two options that match that are freeze and front, so I'm just going to select front, and then I can do the same thing here. I can say DOO and get my door. So now I have it say front door, and now we can also have it announce, we could have it say is open here. If you scroll down to closer to the bottom of the list, we can actually get it to say the state. So we have that variable say open closed. Anytime that message is called up, it will say the current state of that zone. So with the chime we just opened the door, it's going to say front door open. We can easily add zones to the system the same way that we added areas and users and keypads. Right click. Now here we actually have two different options. You can add more hardwired zones, or you can add wireless zones. At this point I'm going to select wireless zones just so that you can get an idea of how that works. So it's set up by groups, and a group is 16 zones. Basically, the architecture of the system, if you know, are catching on to those pop quizzes, 16 is kind of the architecture number for the M1. So all of the zones are grouped in 16. So we can pick our group 2, which is going to be zones 17 through 32, and that's going to add a wireless group. So you can see how that's labeled differently from the hardwired group that we have here that's our main board. Now, the main board zones are programmed by default, but when you add new zones, whether it be hardwired or wireless, they're all going to come in as disabled. So you have to go into programming and program those zones. So let's just double click on zone 17, and I'm going to make this a key fob. I really like those wireless key fobs, the 6010 and our two-way line. They provide status feedback, and it's just really nice little key fobs. So we can set that up. We would pick a definition here. Of course, I'm going to select key fob since that's what I've chose to set up, but you can select if it's a door or a motion or a glass break, and you can select those different zone definitions, or for smoke detectors you would select fire alarm, but I'm going to select key fob. Now the type here, this relates to how the zone is wired. So when we're talking about a wired zone, does it have an end-of-line resistor or not? If it doesn't, then you're going to, you know, select normally open or normally closed here. But for a wireless zone, you're always going to have it on type 0, and that's why that's the only option that I have to select here. I can choose which area this is assigned to, and with the key fob, that's going to determine which area it controls. I could put in a voice description if I felt the need to do that. With the wireless zones, you have this other button here, wireless setup, which I just clicked on, and that brings up this other screen. This is where you would put in the information related to that particular transmitter, sensor, key fob, whatever type of wireless device it happens to be. So we have a place here to put in an ID number. Now, I've mentioned there are 3 different types of wireless options that you could have, either ELK two-way wireless, the ITI Interlogix GE format, or the Honeywell 5800 series. So with the ELK and the ITI GE, you're going to put in a TXID number. Now with some of the GE stuff you might see a DL, but TXID is what's most common with that, and that's also what you see on the ELK two-way stuff is a TXID. So that's where you need to put the number. For the Honeywell 5800 series, you need to put your ID number in the HID field, and that's very important because if you don't put it in the right field, it's not going to properly recognize the signals coming from that device. Now, since this is a key fob, I'm going to be carrying it around with me, and I'm going to be out of range of the receiver. So I need to set the key fob as not supervised so that I don't get an error saying there's a lost transmitter. If it's a door window, sensor, motion detector, glass break, that sort of thing, you want normal supervision. And then, of course, if it's a smoke detector, that sort of thing would take a fire supervision. So you want to make sure you make the correct selection there for your device. Option 1 and Option 2 relate to GE ITI format sensors that have an external contact connected to them. If you have that, you need to select Option 1. If the external contact is normally closed, you also need to select Option 2. Now, that's how it works with the GE to determine that there's an external contact connected, but the ELK wireless and the Honeywell wireless work a little differently in that assignment. We use loop numbers. So you would, instead of having these boxes checked, you would set the correct loop number for the ELK or the Honeywell to determine which part of the sensor is associated with that zone. So that's how you do the wireless setup for the zone. And again, I got there by this button, but there's another wireless setup that has some more options, and that is here on the left side of the screen right below zone's inputs. So if we go to that, you can see some of the information that I set up for zone 17 here. that just kind of gives you an overview of your transmitters. On the receivers tab, you just have some supervision time window options. That's really all that you can set there. But the main thing I want to show you here is the key fob events. And so this is what determines what the key fob buttons do. Whether they arm, disarm, activate a panic button or an automation task, that sort of thing, you can make those selections. So let's say I want my button 4 to be a panic button. So I'm going to select the police alarm for that. And so that would make button 4 be a police alarm when it's activated. You can also select, again, things like automation tasks here. But as with the F keys, and we were mentioning that earlier, you can just write rules for a key fob button, and in that case you don't necessarily need to set an assignment here, but this is where you find that information for your key fob buttons. And if you have any questions about anything that I've gone over, please feel free to type those questions in. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Brad and let him go over some of the other things that you can do with ELKRP.
All right, thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. So right now we are on the left-hand side of the screen. Very quickly, we're going to click on cutoff timers. I'm going to go over this real quick. Basically, each alarm condition within the M1 system has its own unique time value that the alarm will sound. That's how long the siren will go off and so forth. So you're able to adjust this in seconds. Now, 600 seconds is 10 minutes. 65,535 for the fire alarm is pretty much turns on indefinitely until the system is disarmed or until the fire condition is resolved. Now, there are certain alarm conditions which you may not want a siren sound to go off, say, for instance, a water detection alarm, and in which case, if you still want the keypads to beep but no siren sounds and so forth, just simply make that value about 1 second. That's not long enough for the internal amplifier to turn on. Your keypads will still beep, but the sirens will sound for a water alarm. Now, looking at globals, this is some global information for the system, and we're going to go over G1 through G5, which is miscellaneous. And this is for the M1 Gold system, your telephone remote control capability. You can either have that disabled, or you can have local telephone remote control. And one thing we didn't mention earlier, you saw our physical keypads. A house telephone can be used as a keypad also. So if I select local telephone remote telephone control is enabled, I can pick up a house phone and dial either star, 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 or star, 0, star to access the voice prompts of the M1 system, and at which point you can arm and disarm, activate tasks, turn on and off outputs and lights and so forth. If it is set to local and remote, you can do this by calling into your home remotely to access the telephone control features of the system. And then we are able to, on the keypad, display the time in either 12-hour, 24-hour format, display the date, either month, day, or day, month, the temperature, as far as the built-in temperature sensor within the ELK M1K P1 keypad, or using one of our zone temperature sensors. It can either be displayed in Fahrenheit or Celsius. M1 system does have the capability of observing daylight savings time. And you can set up the telephone country code. If you're outside the United States, you want to make sure you adjust this for your region of the world. Global 6 through 10 are for your zones. This is your fast loop response, slow loop response time values, and this is basically how long the zone has to be open for the system will say, yes, that is a valid open zone. In some cases, you may not want to use the fast loop response because if your sensor is a little bit on the borderline, whether the magnet's too far away or it's a weak magnet or something, if you set the fast loop response too fast, you may have a variance in the sensitivity of the sensor, which could give you some false alarms. So generally speaking, slow loop response is normally what you would select for your zone inputs. Cross-zone self-verified, one of the zone attributes discussed earlier was cross-zone pull. What cross-zone pull is if cross-zone pull is enabled and that sensor gets tripped, you need another sensor with cross-zone enabled tripped also before it's a valid alarm. If self-verified is checked, then that sensor can trip twice within the cross-zone verified time period before it constitutes a valid alarm. Generally speaking, you would probably only use that in situations where you may have outdoor beams or something like that, where you have animals or things like that crossing into the beams. You may want both sets of beams tripped before it actually causes an alarm, or perhaps maybe it's a warehouse condition where it's an open warehouse and you have critters, varmints flying around or whatever, tripping sensors. You'd want two sensors tripped within close proximity before it's a valid alarm condition. Under G11 through G12, our user codes, we still support 199 users. You can select all the users to either have 4-digit codes or 6-digit codes. And the wrong code lockout, if somebody is trying to brute force their way into the keypad by just arbitrarily punching in numbers, you can lock them out after so many keystrokes. And that'll lock them out for 1 minute. The common area, area 1, could be common to the other areas. And an example of this perhaps may be a common office or entry point into a multi-doctor office. So you have your entry point and you have your doctors on the left and right hand side. Well, you'd want the area 1 to be armed at some point during the day. So you could only arm area 1 if the other areas are armed. So if somebody leaves early from their area, they could arm their area and leave, and then the last person in the evening arm area 1, and then as long as the other ones are armed, you could arm area 1. If not, then you would not be able to arm the common area. Output 1, or your interior speakers, which does both the voice announcements as well as the siren sounds, there are certain volume settings that you can adjust depending on the situation, such as the output 1 volume upon initial alarm. You may not want that to be full volume at that time. You may want to start that at a lower setting so that it ramps up after about 90 seconds to full volume. And then the maximum volume siren alarm, how loud the siren is when the system goes into alarm. Once again, you may want to start that out at a lower level, especially if you have kids or something. You'll want to startle them immediately. The maximum volume during alarm, after the 90 seconds, you probably want that as loud as you could get it. So the maximum there would be the 7 for maximum volume. Maximum volume non-alarm voice, that's if the system is announcing the front door is open. You may not want that as loud as 7. You may only want that at a volume of 2, which is a lower setting, more pleasing. It's not an alarm condition, so you don't need it blaring at you. So you can adjust the output 1 volume. Now in some cases, you may want to disable all the voice announcements, and you can do that, or you can disable only certain voice announcements for the system. And there's a list of system messages that you could disable if you do not want them speaking. For instance, every time the chime button is pressed, the system would speak chime is on, chime equals tone, or chime equals voice. You may want to disable that if that becomes a nuisance. Now, earlier in the presentation we mentioned output 2, or your supervised output. Output 2, you can either use the built-in Siren driver, in which case you can use 8-ohm speakers, or as long as you don't drop below a total of 4-ohm load connected to output 2, you can use multiple speakers connected. Or you can select voltage out, in which case output 2 is now 12 volt DC at 1 amp max when the system goes into alarm. Now you can delay output 2 from turning on for a certain amount of time so you don't disturb the neighbors. And then you can have a single lockout. After 1 alarm, output 2 would be locked out so that it would be interior alarms only after that. Now the last tab is G29 through G42. These are specials. The telephone remote control feature we talked about earlier. Rings into auto answer. This is twofold. This is either for ELK RP to connect to a modem connection. It'll answer on a certain number of rings. Or if you're calling into the system to access the voice prompts, you want the system to answer after a certain number of rings. If you happen to have an answering machine or answering service, in order to get around that, you would want to enable the ring, hang up, and answer feature, in which case you could call the system, let it ring one time, cancel the call, wait about 20 seconds, call back. System should answer on the next ring. Two-way listen-in and two-way callback time are pretty much for central station use, as well as the central station verify time. And then the rest information concerning serial port 0, your local programming code. That's very important if you're programming from the keypad. You want to be able to access installer level programming. So this is your 6-digit code for getting into keypad programming. And of course we have the ability to lock out all keypad programming if necessary. Several different levels here that you can select. You can actually have view and change all, or only be able to view and change certain things. So be careful with this box right here, because if you accidentally check can't change or view anything, your technician going on site won't be able to access keypad programming. All right, under telephones, the system does support up to 8 telephone numbers. And the way you create a telephone number is you right-click on telephones. We're going to create a new telephone. We're going to start with telephone number 1. And you can see in our list now we have telephone number 1. I'm going to probably program this one for our central station, so this will be an always report to this number. We would enter the name for our central station if you wanted to, the number to dial, and then the reporting format that your central station will support. Now the system does support contact ID, SIA, and 4+2 format to your central station. Now under account numbers for area 1, you have to have a 6-digit account number, even if you have to add leading zeros. So if your central station gives you an account number of 1234, you would simply enter 001234 as your account number, and then the items to be sent when they tripped an alarm condition. Generally speaking, you'd always want alarm events and globals checked for all your installs. The other 3 are kind of optional, especially user events, opening and closings, and so forth. Now if I was going to create another telephone number, and I was going to, let's say I'm going to copy from the first one, it's central station, but this time I'm going to make it a backup. And so I'd have maybe a different telephone number here and so forth, and that would be my central station backup in case the first phone number failed. It is also possible to create a telephone number that we can use in rules later on to call, let's say, Amy's cell in the event that an alarm gets tripped and we want to deliver a voice message. So we would enter cell number here, and we'll use that in rules here in just a little bit. Communicator, we have several items under the Communicator tab, and these are report codes. Under each one, you have different options that you can report to your central station when the event takes place. Now let's say, for instance, if we set up a duress code, for instance, obviously we'd want the duress code to transmit that silent panic to our alarm station. In order to enable that code, we would simply make the pulse value 0, 1, or any non-zero value. If it is 0, 0, these are disabled. They will not send to central station. Now notice we have our area 2 and 3 tabs. This is per area, so be careful when setting up your report codes to make sure that you are enabling it in all 3 areas if it applies. The user codes are the opening and closings, and once again, they're disabled in this. To enable, simply make it a 0, 1. And now the opening and closings for user 1 will be reported to Central Station. One of the most important is the zone RCs. Now, since we've only got our 16 zones set up right now, you notice they're already enabled. So they're going to send the alarm condition and the trouble condition to our Central Station when these events take place. Now, if we don't want the troubles to transmit, we can right-click on the column, and we can set the entire column to disabled without having to click each individual one. System RCs, AC fail, your AC restore, your low battery, so forth. Your automatic test of the system is set up here, and I can enable that code to transmit to my Central Station. So right now I am set up to automatically test my communicator every day at midnight. So every day at midnight it's going to send a test signal, a daily test, to my Central Station. The keypad panics, those once again are by keypad, and obviously we probably want the fire alarm and the police and the medical to be transmitted to Central Station when those events took place, and that is by keypad. But obviously we wouldn't want that one because that's an automation task. Notice it's grayed out, so depending on the definition will determine if the pulse value is enabled or able to be enabled or disabled. So any questions under communicator? There's still a lot of good information there, and if you have any questions, please give us a call or send us an email. We'd love to discuss those with you. Right now I wanted to get into the automation aspect of the system, because up to this point we've really talked nothing but the security aspects of the M1. And when we get into the automation is really where we start setting the M1 apart from other security systems in what we can do through the rules. You can control lighting, you can control thermostats, you can have the system speak, you can have the system call you if it's a non-alarm condition. So real quickly, I notice we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to go through some of this kind of quickly. I do apologize. So right now, under task, tasks basically are just a name. So right now, we could call task 1 water the lawn. If I wanted to, I could assign a voice description to the task, and basically that's just giving a name. It's not doing anything just yet. Later on, we'll create a rule to water the lawn and so forth. And you can have up to 32 different tasks. Lighting control. The M1 has the capability of integrating with a number of different lighting control manufacturers and technologies. If you get a chance, visit our website under the Partners page. Take a look under lighting. We do the very simple X10 all the way up to the more elaborate Central Light and Z-Wave lighting. So you get a feel for how expandable and how versatile the M1 system is when it starts to integrate with lighting and thermostats and so forth. So you can have up to 256 lighting devices, and for most applications it'll be 193 devices, and then the last 64 are your scenes and groups and so forth. Remember earlier we talked about the number of outputs the M1 system has. You can have up to 205 outputs. And on this screen here we can give a name to the first 64. We thought that would be plenty of outputs to give a name to as far as being able to show them on the keypads and so forth. And then after that it's just simply output 65, 66 and so forth. When you're writing your rules and so forth and you're creating life enhancement type scenarios, you may want to adjust the lighting when it's dark outside or when it becomes sunrise or sunset. And the way you set that feature up is under the Sunrise Sunset tab. You'd want to select a city near you. In this case, we are in, let's select Chapel Hill. That's good. And we're going to use these settings. And we're going to calculate the sunrise and sunset values for Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We can also manually enter the latitude and longitude and select our time zone. And the system will automatically calculate when sunrise and sunset is anticipated. This is also very useful. We can always know when it's dark, past sunset, and when it's light, when it's past sunrise. We can use these values in rules. The voice tab, like I said, the M1 has a 500-word voice vocabulary. There are a number of predefined voice descriptions and voice messages. You can actually click on this tab and you can go in and you can edit these if you'd like. Caution should be taken, because if you edit one that's associated with something specific, you may not get the exact results. So just take caution when editing the voice messages, but it is possible to do so. One that you might find beneficial is the, let me expand this open a little bit, is the system special. We have miscellaneous messages. These are blank. You can define any message that you want to here. We also have a feature in the M1 system where you can custom record 10 6-second locations directly into the board using a house telephone as a microphone. If you get an opportunity, take a look at page, I believe it's 19 of the installation manual. It has step-by-step instructions on how to create those custom recordings. So if there is a word or phrase that's not in our vocabulary, you can always add that yourself. And that's going to be whoever's voice is doing the recording. Hopefully it sounds a little better than mine, but you can always make a nice recording using the house phone as a microphone. I'm going to jump down here to text real quick. Under the text tab, right now you see it's blank. Text is used in a couple different areas. We can create a custom text string, say, excuse me. You can have a text string, say happy birthday, go across the keypad based upon a rule. You can have a text string that says take the trash out, change the air filter, pay your monthly bill, things like that, you know, happy anniversary, things like this. So you can create different text messages that will display across the keypad. You can also create custom ASCII strings which can be sent out the control to third-party equipment. It happens to be a piece of equipment that we don't directly integrate with, but we know they have their RS-232 ASCII protocol available. It is possible to, through our XSP, our serial port expander, to be able to send custom ASCII strings back and forth to have the M1 communicate with a third-party equipment that we may not be integrated with just yet. Now then, rules. This is where the power of the M1. You're limited to your imagination when it comes to rules. Basically, rules in the M1 adds life enhancement, life feature benefits, automation based upon whenever. Okay. Now, under whenever, we have all these parameters that you can choose from. You can have something happen based upon the time of day. So you know at 12 o'clock on Thursdays you need something to happen, you can get a reminder, either the keypad or a voice description, or the system can call you and say, oh, by the way, it's 12 o'clock on Thursday, and give you one of those predefined voice messages from the vocabulary. The whenever statement covers the zone input changes. Whenever a zone changes state, whether it be secure, not secure, bypassed, we can base upon output changes. When one of those 205 outputs changes state, that can be a whenever. Our F key presses, we set up the automation task earlier. So we could say something like whenever F6 on keypad 1 is pressed, we could have something happen. We could arm that other area. The key fob, our wireless fobs, you can actually write rules based upon those fobs, one of those fob buttons being pressed. Lighting. If a light happens to change and it transmits its status when it does change, you can use that in rules based upon somebody walking up to a switch, turning off that switch, the M1 receives this light is now off, do something different. Our automation task earlier, remember we had to water the lawn. That's just a name for the task. We haven't told it what to do yet. So here we're going to tell water the lawn. We're going to say whenever task 1, water the lawn, is activated, then we're going to turn an output. We'll say output 3. We're going to turn it on for 15 minutes. So from the keypad or the third-party app or the ELK M1 to go, we can activate water the lawn task, and turn output 3 on for 15 minutes. And that rule is done. We look at our other whenevers. Security. Whenever the system is disarmed, whenever it is armed, the burglar alarm turns on. Let's say whenever any alarm, any area turns on, I want to then dial a telephone number. I'm going to call Amy, and I'm going to speak a message. In this case, it was Keypad Panic, but I could have selected anything from the drop-down list. And that rule's done. Remember we talked about the text strings being received? So these are the whenever events. This is what takes place. Now we can condition that with an AND statement. And the ANDs are basically, you can condition it that if the AND statement is true, then the other lines in the rule will activate. In this case, we can have it be the time of day, whether it be a specific day of the week or month or year. We can have our AND statements take a look to see if it's light outside, if it's dark outside. Have it look at the zone inputs to see if the zone is open or closed. The last user. If the system disarmed and the last user was Brad, I may want to activate a different task to have the lighting come to a whole different level versus when it's user 1, for instance. So these are all the AND statements. Now, I can only have one whenever statement, but I can have multiple AND statements. But each one must be true before we'll go to the next AND statement. Now, once all the AND statements are true, what do you want to happen? That's your then statement. So you can activate an automation task. I can control the security system by arming it or disarming it. I can turn on or off the outputs. I can control the lighting. I can speak specific messages. I can send a custom ASCII string out to another third-party equipment. I can send a custom text string to the keypad. I can enable or disable the chime features. I can beep the keypads, chirp the outside sirens. We didn't talk much about counters, but the system has a number of counters that can be added to, subtracted to, set to specific values. We use a lot of counters as flags so that we can use a single button and toggle the counter between 0 and 1. If it's 0, it does one event. If it's 1, it does another event. That way you don't tie up 2 buttons on your keypad. I can dial that phone number. The system has the capability of sending email messages. Control the thermostats. You know, we're all about energy management these days. So whenever the system arms to the away mode, set the thermostat back to a different setting. Make sure all the lights are turned off. I can enable or disable users based upon a day of the week, specific times. So if it's a cleaning person or if it's a construction crew, I'll only allow their code to operate Monday through Thursday from 8 to 5. After that, their codes are disabled. I can turn on and off the voice, the non-alarm voice messages, bypass or unbypass zones, and reset the smoke power if necessary. And we do have the capability of sending generic audio commands to Rust Sound, Proficient, and Nuvo. So in a nutshell, you can see that the rule engine, quite flexible, and like I said, you're limited to your imaginations on some of the things you can do. You can do access control, energy management, control your sprinklers. We've had people do Halloween displays using the M1, having it automate their Halloween displays and so forth, and their Christmas lights. If you have any specifics, we do have some, we have some rules, some sample rules on the website.
There are two different places where you can find that sort of information on the website now. Under the support section, we have a support tools category, and you can find some application notes there. We've also got a blog on our website, and you can access that right from the home page, and you'll find also some applications there with rules examples. We also did a webinar a while back focusing just on rules, so you can find that on our YouTube channel, as well as a number of other helpful videos that kind of dive in deeper than we were able to get today. We have run out of time. We've actually run over, and we really appreciate you staying with us to cover that extra bit of ELKRP. There's just so much the system can do, and so much we want to show you. We have a hard time packing it into the hour and a half we slotted here. There were some questions that we couldn't get to. I will provide feedback, follow up on those in an email to you. So if you ask a question you didn't get answered, we're sorry about not being able to answer that for you live, but we will get that answer to you. We're going to be ending the webinar soon, and again, thank you for hanging with us here these extra few minutes. There is a very short survey at the end of the webinar, and if you could complete that for us just to give us some feedback, we'll put you in a random drawing, and you could win a ELK t-shirt and hat. So if you have just a couple more minutes, I know we're asking a lot, but it is a very short survey. So if you have time, please do that. Thank you for being with us today. I want to thank Brad for just doing a great job with us on this webinar today, and getting the information out there. If you have any questions at all that maybe you didn't think to ask, or you want some additional help, you can find stuff on our website, elkproducts.com, or you can send me an email at training@elkproducts.com, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Be sure to connect with us on social media, and again, a lot of great information to take you to the next level beyond what we've covered today on our YouTube channel. I'd also just like to mention that we are going to be at CEDIA next month, so if you're going to CEDIA, please come check out our booth and see what we've got going on. Hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it, everyone. Thank you for attending.